officers to this meeting of Governance and Audit Committee, which, due to government advice to continued practice social distancing, will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as possible following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. It should be noted that the chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the Officer for Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. I would ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. So if I can ask the Democratic Services Officer to announce those members in attendance, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members in attendance today are Councillor Altaf Hussain, Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Cheryl Green, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor Lynn Walters, yourself as Chairperson, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Pam Davis, and Councillor Tom Beadle. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Michael. I will now proceed to agenda business. And so the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, please. Do we have any apologies? So Councillor Amanda Williams.
Hi, thanks very much, Chair. Can I give apologies for Elaine Venables, please? And can I also apologise that I do have to pop out at 3 o'clock to do the school run, but I will return and I will let officers know when I return to the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Kern.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to leave at 4 o'clock because I've got another meeting with a constituent that's got a problem he wants me to look at. So I apologise for that.
Thank you. And Councillor Cheryl Green.
Yeah, my apologies, Chair. I will have to leave at 3:30 due to a prior commitment.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we have no more apologies for absence, we'll go on to agenda item number 2, declarations of interest, please. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Cheryl Green.
My apologies, I haven't lowered my hand.
Oh, right, that's okay. So no declarations of interest. So then we'll move on to agenda item number 3, the minutes. Can I ask if everybody has read them and if they are agreed, please, and the proposer and seconder?
Move. Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Williams, you have your hand up.
I do, Chair, and it's not in relation to the minutes as such. I had my hand up a few times, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's perfectly fine. Just possibly an oversight, however. When the names were being read out as to attendees, I wasn't included. Now, perhaps that's as expected, but just to note that, please.
Of course, yeah, and thank you. Michael, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, apologies, Joe. I did realise after I'd finished, but your attendance will be noted.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe we had a proposer and seconder on the minutes. Mrs. Williams, your hand is still up. I don't know whether you've got something else to raise about the minutes. Nope. Okay.
Apologies. No.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the action log. So can I have, has anybody got any questions or comments on, well, sorry, I do apologise. I'll pass over to Mark to take us through the action log. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief on this because there's a large agenda today. Mark Galvin, Interim Democratic Services Manager. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the Governance and Audit Committee action record, devised to assist committee in tracking its decisions, as well as any follow-up action required on these. The action record, members, is attached to the Appendix A to the report. I therefore take you to the report's recommendation outlined in paragraph 9.1 of the same. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. And Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks very much. I picked up 2 things on here. First of all, it says with regards to the DFGs, committee awaits data info. Should this be available? And then if we look at our agenda, we've got a report that discusses DFGs in some detail, and it's also listed under the Wales Audit Office's report as well, that they're looking at it. So I'd be rather alarmed if the data wasn't available, because it says in the column, should it be available? I think we should be having this data available if there are so many sets of eyes looking at this as a subject as well. So that was my first concern. And then it says under complaints process about we're looking at the complaints process, and it's got today's date as coming to committee, but I couldn't see it on the agenda.
Thank you, Amanda. When I looked at this, I thought that we would be agreeing the working party today within this action log, within the review of the action log, but I can see that Jill has put her hand up. So Jill, did you want to come in on something?
Just to say that in terms of the DFG, you have indeed got a report on progress in front of you. I think probably what the action log refers to, Councillor Williams, is the difficulty in the data because of the 2 years that we've had and the ability to deliver DFGs. So as you know, a lot of the stats for the Welsh Government haven't been collected for the last 2 years. So perhaps when we go through the report, you might want to refer to it then. I can see your hand's gone back up, so I'll wait to answer the second one.
Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks. I'm happy to go through it then, but it did say that they are monitoring timeliness in delivery, so we should have those figures, and we should be able to have them when that report comes to us, because it's been specifically highlighted that in the report that we need to improve timeliness in delivery, and the only way we're going to improve that is if we have the statistics there to show the time it's taken to carry them out.
Can I suggest that we cover off?
Don't disagree.
Yeah.
Jill?
No, sorry, do you want me to come back to it in the DFGs? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest that we come back to them in the DFG, and at that point we will fully update the action log with whatever whatever actions we believe to be appropriate after listening to the DFG report, if that's okay. Amanda, are you happy with that?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. And on the other point about the working party, I believe that at this point we need to agree the membership of the working party and also agree a time for us to come back to the committee with an update on the complaints. And I believe that at the last meeting, and thank you, Amanda, for chairing in my absence for the last meeting. I believe at the last meeting, Councillor Amanda Williams and Councillor Cheryl Green asked to be part of the working party. Is that still the case?
Yes, please, for me.
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Lovely. And so the three of us, if we can, so the working party for complaints to be myself, Councillor Amanda Williams and Councillor Cheryl Green. And I propose that we bring a full update in March to the Governance and Audit Committee, because that will give us time to liaise with officers. I'm aware of Christmas in between times and also the MTFS process. So would everybody be happy if we come with an update in March?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Yes. Thank you. So on that basis, any more comments on the action log, agenda item number 4? Can I have a proposer and a seconder to note the report and for the comments that we've had to be updated?
5 or 4?
I'm happy to support that.
Thank you. So we will now move on to agenda item number 5, which is changes to the membership of the Governance and Audit Committee. And in Kelly's absence, Jill, I believe that you're going to be taking us through on this.
Yes, Chair, thank you. For the purpose of the recording, it's Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. And the purpose of this report is for the committee to note changes to the membership of the Governance and Audit Committee, which will take effect following the AGM of Council on the 18th of May 2022. Members will be familiar with the proposals in the Local Government and Elections Act, as we brought a previous report to this committee. This is just to update you on any further progress. So the authority already has, obviously, the Governance and Audit Committee. It was a statutory requirement from the measure back in 2011. And the measure makes a number of requirements in relation to the Audit Committee's membership, including appointment of chairperson and the committee's remit. And you can see it through to the statutory functions, which we've been operating, obviously, in the council for some time. The Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 has added additional responsibilities to the committee, which we've spoken about previously. And those are linked primarily with governance and include the consideration of aspects of performance and also complaints, both of which we have referred to previously. So the current membership of this committee has 12 BCBC members, 1 independent lay member, and the current lay member, as we know, is Mrs. Williams, who's here today. And Mrs. Williams won't mind me saying that she was reappointed for a further term at the AGM in 2017, but can only sit for a maximum of 2 terms in this capacity, and that will expire in May 2022. Members will also require 1/3 of the membership of the committee to be lay members, and indeed for the chairperson to be a lay member. And in October, Council approved that change. So you'll see it for 3. This particular part of the statutory guidance relates to those political considerations or allegiances, which is vitally important for lay members of an audit committee. The lay members will only be able to serve 2 full terms in any local authority and will be subject to the provisions of the Code of Conduct. So just to bring you up to date, national adverts have been placed in conjunction with the Welsh Local Government Association as well as on the council's website. And the closing date has now gone. And all applications will be presented to an officers panel consisting of the monitoring officer, the chief finance officer and the head of internal audit to shortlist. And you'll see the following criteria in 452, which will be used to assess those applications. Shortlisted candidates will be interviewed by the panel and, if appropriate, appointed. And you will see the financial implications set out in 8.1. So the committee are asked to note the changes and to receive a further report advising of the appointments in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jill. Before I move on to ask for the report to be moved and noted, I can see that Councillor Amanda Williams has her hand up. Amanda.
Hi, thanks very much. When we discussed this at council, one of the queries and the concerns that I brought up was about if we don't have enough applicants. If the applications have closed, are we content that we've got enough applicants? Because obviously I'm concerned that we're struggling to get people to apply for other jobs in the authority. So are we content that we've got enough applicants? And my question coming from that then, so if we had, for example, 8 out of 8 come forward, only 8 applicants came forward for 8 positions, would we then just simply slot them in, or would they still have to go through the rigorous process and then we could potentially go back out to advert, or would we just accept all 8? And that was the first one. And the report says about the political allegiance, and you look at the parties. Do we also look at if they've just recently left a party as well to apply? Because if you had, for example, 5 people just suddenly leave a political party to apply for this, would we look at that, or would we discount that because they've in effect left the party? Thanks.
Okay, so so we're looking for 4, not 8. So so that's the first issue. We have had applicants. They haven't yet been assessed because they will need to be appropriately qualified. So no, we wouldn't be just slotting 4 people in just because we had 4 applications. They need to be suitably qualified, and there is the opportunity, of course, because it is November, to go back out to advert should that prove to be necessary. We would obviously, I'm not the monitoring officer, and Kelly covers the Code of Conduct, but I would suggest that that it would be inappropriate for a number of people to leave a political party and then apply, and we would bring that into consideration. It is set out, the political allegiance, and there will be, I suppose, all sorts of questions about how you assess that. Kelly can probably answer it better, Councillor Williams, but the whole point is obviously these lay members should be completely objective and on the committee to help with governance. So the Governance and Audit Committee has prided itself, I think, on being apolitical, and I think that's the absolute bar that people will have to prove that they have no political motive.
Jill, I think you have frozen, but I think
so. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, Jill, you had frozen slightly during that, and you seem to have frozen now. I think I've grasped what you were saying, but Councillor Amanda Williams, are you happy with that?
I am, yes, thanks. I've just got one other question on this report, if possible. When it says about fees, do we receive any additional funding to because this is an additional requirement for the authority. I notice it comes out of the Democratic Services budget, but are we now forced to bear that as an additional cost on the authority? Because obviously we're trying to make cuts, and so it's an additional cost for us if we're paying for this. And also, under the fees, do these lay members get paid for the time taken to read papers as well, or is it just the day they turn up for the committee? Because obviously, if you've got a lengthy amount of papers, we're asking individuals to take time out to read those too. Thanks.
Yeah. In answer to the question about payment, yes, there is a set rate, but you will have I understand, although it's all to be clarified, that there will be a time for reading those papers, but it won't be an open-ended time. My understanding is that there'd be sort of set times given for reading papers and the like. So can you just remind me what the first question was? Councillor Williams, can you just...
Yeah,
sorry.
it was, do we get any funding that comes with this additional requirement? Because
yes.
Yeah, because it comes out of our part, out of Democratic Services, but we're being asked to now fund four positions in effect.
Yes, I mean, it's a fairly insignificant in the overall budget, I have to say. I'm sure it'll be wrapped up in the settlement. Mark appeared a minute ago. Was he going to say something?
Oh, that's all it was, Jill, just to support what you've said in terms of answer the question. My Teams is playing up, so I wasn't sure whether I was going to appear or not, but yeah, just to support the answers you've already provided, essentially. Yeah, thank you.
I think the other thing to thank you both for that. I think the other thing to remember is, of course, there won't be a senior salary that will be being paid to an elected chair, so that will also be a bit of a cost saving. Now my screen has gone funny now, so my screen is also playing up. Can I just ask that you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, it's just everything had gone blank, and I was just slightly concerned that the Teams issue had come to Merthyr Mawr Road as well. So that's good news. Great. So if there are, and thank you, Jill, for taking us through the report and giving the full responses to Councillor Williams. Can I ask if there are no further questions, that we note the report and agree to receive a further report in the coming months?
No.
Yeah, with that.
Thank you very much, everybody. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 6, which are the Audit Wales reports. And Sam, I believe that you're going to be taking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think John will quickly run through the financial audit element. John, are you there?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
John Llewellyn, Audit Wales. So in terms of the financial audit work, the audit of the Statement of Accounts 2021 was completed and certified by the 31st of July 2021. The 2 annual returns we complete. Porthcawl Harbour Authority was also certified by the 31st of July 2021, and Coedchurch Crematorium was certified by the 30th of September 2021. The work we've got left for the 2021 year is our grants and returns work, which we just commenced that, and at the moment we're planning to be able to deliver all the grants audits by the deadlines required. And that's all our work for the 2021 financial year. Thanks.
Thank you, John. So Samantha Clements, Audit Wales. I'll just open the document. So so the performance audit work programme for 2021, we are about to draw that to a close with the publication of our annual audit summary, and we're planning on doing this before Christmas this year. The 21-22 performance work programme, the assurance and risk assessment review, we are in the process of drawing that to a close and involving external regulators, and we've contacted the council for a date for us to present our findings to Corporate Management Board in February. And at that point, we can discuss with the Council our plans for next year's Performance Audit Work Programme, and we do intend to bring a product to a future Governance and Audit Committee. The Springing Forward review, this is focusing on two traces, looking at assets and workforce. We're in the process of setting up that fieldwork, and we are hoping to deliver that in early December. The follow-up review of DFGs, that review is underway, and the report today will assist us in that regard. And the review relating to the Cwm Taf Morgannwg Health and Social Care Partnership, that should actually read. This piece of work is now underway. Again, we are working with external regulators, CIW, to be involved in the feedback process, and we're planning on doing that in January 2022 once the fieldwork is complete. And the next annual audit summary, well, that'll be 12 months hence. So in terms of the local government national studies and the CIW and ESTIN work programmes and our national reports, again, I don't propose to run through these, but if the committee should have any questions, I can take them back to the office and come back with a response to those queries. And I think that's all for this particular item, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sam. And I've just seen that Councillor Richard Granville has joined us. So, Michael, if you can add Councillor Richard Granville to the list of attendees for us, please. And Richard, if you're able to turn your camera off now. Thank you. And has anybody got any questions for Sam on the first part of the Audit Wales reports, please? Or for John, of course, on the accounts? No. Okay, so Sam, if I can ask you to take us through the second part, the financial sustainability report, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So obviously this is a national report, financial sustainability of local government, taking into account the impact of the pandemic, the approaches to recovery and the future challenges. I don't propose to go through the report in detail, but I will focus on some of the key points, if I may. So in terms of the key points in the broader picture and context, the UK and Welsh governments provided, some significant funding, and I think that's illustrated in Exhibit 4, which has helped local authorities manage that immediate impact of the crisis. But again, there are future uncertainties about funding, well, in terms of the range and scale of future local government funding in the coming years. Then local government financial sustainability in Wales. I mean, currently it's in better shape than in England. I think that, there's at a very high level, but again, there are concerns about those future funding sources. Then observation about general increases in public sector borrowing during the pandemic. I mean, I'm not sure if this is such a huge issue specifically in Wales. This again is a contextual observation. Impact of the pandemic, again, giving rise to demand pressures, in particular in health, social care and education, and the scale and complexity of this is as yet unknown. And the pandemic has also raised the profile of local government in Wales. It's played a significant role in managing the crisis and assisting in helping keep residents safe and healthy. So the national report is an amalgamation of our findings, and in 2021, our work programme, there were two specific phases to this work. And again, this work happened across all 22 councils in Wales. But this report focuses on 5 specific elements. In terms of the financial impact of the pandemic, I mean, overall, we found a mixed picture in terms of councils' financial sustainability. And again, this is because of the increasing levels of funding from Welsh Government to manage the crisis and how they've mitigated some of the costs of the pandemic. And obviously an improvement then as a result in terms of the level of reserves at the end of the year. Then financial strategies. I think this report emphasises the need to continue to deliver those services and the need to develop and implement strategies to strengthen financial sustainability. And I suppose this is it again in the medium and the long term. And I think those areas of focus are summarised in Exhibit 6. And they include, for example, a range of data to inform financial planning, planning, considering levels of changes of levels of demand, as I've mentioned, and resulting costs of delivering services, how councils intend to meet the budget gaps that are forecast in the forthcoming years, and planning for different scenarios. I think it's worth saying, though, that as part of our phase 2 review, we did notice that the council had actually worked on their strategy in terms of dealing with some of the challenges that we'd raised in the previous review, so that was positive. And the reserves position, again, in terms of the approaches to planning and the use of reserves, and regularly reviewing their use and performance against budget, keeping an eye on overspends and underspends, and basically the ongoing management of budget throughout the year, and savings, delivery and liquidity, and that is the extent to which current assets cover current liabilities and debt in the accounts. Just the process of identifying and making those savings and having realistic and robust savings plans. So just in summary, our phase 1 report found that councils were working well together to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, and some councils were better placed financially to deal with the challenges than others. And in phase 2, we found that councils had received significant extra funding to deal with the pandemic, but again, it's about the future and how challenging it could potentially be, and it's just that level of uncertainty, and the specific elements in terms of the ongoing pandemic, because we are still in that crisis, Brexit, and the future funding uncertainties. So the report also refers to the next steps. So as part of our assurance and risk assessment work, we will continue to monitor Council's financial position, but we are also engaging closely with the Society of Welsh Treasurers. And the next step is we intend to publish a financial sustainability, easy for me to say, data tool once we've completed the 2020 audit of the accounts, and then that will be updated annually. So that's all I wanted to say on that. I tried to be quick. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sam. Can I ask, has anybody got any questions for Sam, please, on this? Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just the one question, really, Sam. I mean, this is obviously this is a national report, so we just need to, I guess, make sure that we're not missing any of the important points as far as Bridgend is concerned. But in the report, it is stated that the impact of the pandemic is still unfolding, if you like. In fact, the pandemic is still with us. But yet, in your plan for the future and your future work, you don't actually refer to obtaining any more evidence or drawing any more conclusions about the impact. And I just wondered, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, if I may, Chair. So as part of our assurance and risk assessment, we look at the Council's financial position throughout the year. We have regular liaison meetings with key officers. We have close liaison with internal audit and financial audit. So that information is always on our radar.
Yes, thank you. But I think what I'm getting at is the uncertainty, and this comes up later, by the way, in the corporate risk assessment, the uncertainty about the COVID impact. And I think what I'm asking about is, are you planning to help reduce that uncertainty with your future work? You know, and from a national perspective, of course, as regards to this report. So, and you know, when, dare I ask, might you foresee that there is greater clarity about the financial impact that the pandemic has had?
Sorry, Councillor, I don't think I can really answer that in terms of what will happen. But in terms of the here and now, we are constantly monitoring, and we will provide feedback and information to the council as we find it. I mean, John, I don't know if you have any views on this. you know, there are other regulators. So, for example, in terms of increasing demand, for example, in education, children's mental health, ALN, I know that Estin and CIW will be focusing on these areas.
Yeah, I don't, sorry, I know at the end of the report it says we'll consider it in the future and then see if we need to build any further reviews into our work programmes. I think when we, like I said, when we get a better understanding in the future of what happens in terms of the impact of the pandemic, we'll then consider whether we need to do another review at a later date.
Okay, thank you, Chair, that's fine.
Thank you, Sam. And I can see, Jill, you have a question as well, or you have your hand up. Mrs. Williams, you still have your hand up. I don't know whether it's a legacy hand. Yeah, Jill, over to you, Jill, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Sam, for presenting the financial sustainability. In terms of Mrs. Williams's question, I think it's an absolutely excellent question. I think what we had also a local financial sustainability report, Mrs. Williams, that you may recall came to the Audit Committee a couple of meetings ago, and the national report pretty much mirrors the recommendations in the local ones. So I don't think we're too far removed, but I think it's fair to say that whilst the report makes a number of recommendations about financial planning, predicting costs for the future, demand, strengthening financial sustainability, all the rest of those things that we've all talked about for many years, it doesn't really help us in terms of what exactly we're supposed to do when we've got short-term grants being thrown at us. Our local report appeared to be criticising our level of reserves rather than saying that we've done a good job. And I think that the question that you ask about how and when will we have any idea about when these pressures crystallise is absolutely spot on, Mrs. Williams. And as finance professionals, we can financial plan until we're blue in the face, but we're in the most incredibly unpredictable time in terms of our financial position. From one day to the next, I could have nearly 3 million coming in to spend by the end of the year. And that doesn't really force me down the good financial planning route. However, having said all that, we have brought reports regularly through to Council and to Cabinet that sets out how we're being as prudent as we can in terms of our levels of reserves for the future, and our budget monitoring reports set out very clearly where we believe the pressures are. But I think your question's absolutely spot on. Does this report actually give us what we need? No, not at this point in time. And I think that's probably something for Audit Wales perhaps to consider for the future, is how, and I know this was probably a piece of assurance work, but it's really what do all the recommendations really mean in terms of our uncertain funding streams? So thank you, Mrs. Williams. It was a very pertinent question.
Thank you, Jill. And that leads me on, I must admit, to my question for you, Sam, if I may. Within the report, we talk about the current issues and planning for financial sustainability. But as Jill has just alluded to, the Welsh Government grant process has been ongoing, well, ever since I was elected in 2017. I'm sure it has before. And as Jill has alluded to, it's not just the pandemic. Money comes in at the 11th hour, and it is then impossible for our finance team. We can't assume that extra money is going to come through. And I couldn't see anything within the report that talked about any recommendations or discussions with Welsh Government around how Welsh Government could actually help all of the councils within Wales, but particularly we're interested in Bridgend, so that we can get the correct plans in place to actually understand what services we can deliver and what we can actually afford to deliver to our residents. Is anything being done on that, please?
Sorry, John, are you able to respond to this?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything at the moment. It's, we can have a look into it and come back to you at the next committee meeting if you want. Yes, okay.
But
I think that would be helpful, and I think Mrs. Williams, is there something that you're also looking at? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but would that also give you a little bit of comfort as well?
Well, yes, I think you're right. It would. I mean, you know, we just can't sort of just go along with all of this uncertainty. And you know, I'm not trying to be difficult here, but you know, hand wringing isn't going to work, and we really need to do our best to forecast the impact. That's what we need to be doing. It's forecasting and, you know, thinking up scenarios about what's likely to be the impact. And this isn't just Bridgend, this is all of the authorities, of course. And I think perhaps Audit Wales could help us with that, that's all.
Thank you. So Sam, if you are able to come back with or Sam and John to the next meeting, with an update, and we'll add it onto the action log to understand what, you know, if any work is actually happening, to help the funding, really, to help the certainty of funding streams.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So any other questions for Sam or John, please? No, so thank you both for that report. Could I ask then for a proposer and a seconder for the report, to note the report?
Move.
Second.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 7, which is the half-year annual governance statement review. And Jill, I believe that you're taking us through this.
I am, Chair. Okay, thank you. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. I'll be relatively brief on this report, Chair. You have in front of you the half-year review of the annual governance statement. Members of the Governance and Audit Committee will recall that you received the annual governance statement at a previous audit committee, and this is the half-yearly update on that. So, as you know, we're required as an authority to produce an annual governance statement. It was presented on the 18th of June, and good corporate governance requires that we actively review all the things in there that we said we wanted to do to improve. So the final AGS is attached at Appendix A, and in Appendix B you will see that we have taken all the improvements that we said that we were going to do, and it gives you an update on progress against those. I wasn't really proposing to take the audit committee through those improvements updates in any particular detail. There's a very full narrative against each of them, but I think, Chair, perhaps best to open it up for questions on any of those items individually. Chair, I can't hear you.
Sorry, it's on mute. I do apologise. Thank you very much, Jill. So I'll now open up. Has anybody got any questions to Jill for the action plans for the annual governance statement review? No, I can't see any hands going up. I have only one suggestion, and that is an addition, and it's really building on the financial sustainability work by Audit Wales and the uncertainty with our funding. And that was to ask whether we're going to have a new cohort of councillors May next year. So is financial sustainability part of the induction plan, and to go through the finances and to actually understand about the really hard choices that need to be made by the council? Is that part of the induction plan, and is that something that would be included within this?
Chair, would you want me to pick that up? I think also Deb Exton and Mark Galvin may have more to add, but there will be a full programme for the new councillors, and one of the items on there will be the financial regime and what we're doing in terms of the financial sustainability. So yes, it will be picked up. I've just noticed my background seems to have disappeared while I'm on the call, so I shall put that right.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you wanted to come back. Thank you for that, Jill. Mark?
Yes, thanks, Chair and Jill. There is a comprehensive member induction programme proposed that we're going through now, and that will include all elements of training that councillors existing and in the new term of office who become elected will be involved in. It's in draft format, but it is very comprehensive. So, but anything that members wish to add to that, and we will be making it available soon, that's welcome, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so if there are no other questions for Jill on this, and thank you, Jill, for the report and all the work that's been done on this, can I ask for a mover and seconder that we have considered the action plan and the progress?
No.
Second.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 8, which is the update on the DFG. So Jill, I'll hand over to you, and then I believe Martin will be taking us also through the report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This, for the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer Finance, Performance and Change. This is an update on the disabled facilities grants and a progress report and position statement. And I've got with me Martin Morgans, Head of Service, and Lynn Berry, Head of Housing. And you will recall that you've had a number of reports from both Audit Wales and from internal audit on disabled facilities grants. And you'll also recall that we brought update positions and some of the difficulties that we were having in unravelling some of the arrangements that we didn't feel were conducive to an efficient and effective service. And then obviously we hit the pandemic, and this is one of those services that was hit quite badly, obviously, by the ability to go into people's homes. So there's a number of facets to this. I'll pass over now. I think Martin Lynn is going to talk through the report, and happy for us. We're all here to answer questions.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Lynn Berry. I'm Group Manager for Housing. I'm briefly going to take you through the report before you, and as you can see, and as Jill has already mentioned, this really has attempted to summarise and consolidate some of the comments and recommendations that have come from a number of other reports on DFGs. You know, there have been Wales-wide and local audit reports with recommendations. And this is an attempt to feedback on the actions that we've taken. As Jill mentioned, you know, the previous reports have really outlined the far-reaching and fundamental changes required for the service. and we've predicted a 2-year period to implement the changes, which we're essentially 7 months into that period now, because the new way of working basically came in on the 1st of April of this year. So the appendices outline the progress and the actions to date. And I think, one of the things that it may be worth emphasising is that we are working to respond to those recommendations. And whilst there are some areas of work that we're either currently working on and we can't report on, or will be taken forward, it is an intention to be able to respond to the recommendations, because I think the clear message that comes from it is that the service needs fundamental changes, and it's got to be a customer-centred and customer-focused service, which we all sign up to completely. The first major change, I think, is that from the 1st of April this year, the service has been brought in-house. Previously, some of the work was undertaken by independent agents, and that meant that we didn't have control from end-to-end delivery and the applications. So the point of bringing it in-house was that we had that control and that we had that end-to-end responsibility and delivery. And that's the start of it that this year. Applicants do have a choice of using an independent agent if they wish, but we would hope that the default position will really be that the service is delivered by the council, because I think, our intention is obviously to increase and improve delivery times and make sure that all of the standards and the safeguarding and all sorts of controls are in place, and we feel that we will have those and putting everyone in a better position. The report makes reference to strategic change and Welsh Government standards, and that's a reference to really the new guidance that's coming out by Welsh Government that is currently being considered, and it will be a further report to Cabinet. But the key messages around that are about having a consistent and regional approach, and it's about working very closely with social services, and just as importantly about working closely with health as well. So we'll be looking at those recommendations and the guidance. It is only guidance at this stage, but we will be looking at what actions are needed to be put in place, and we'll be reporting to members in the near future. I won't sort of take you through all the actions, because there's a lot of details in the appendices, but I just wanted to sort of highlight a couple of issues really. In relation to, between paragraphs 4.5 and 4.12, it outlines some of the actions that have been undertaken by us in relation to the recommendations. And I think there are a couple of important and key issues here to highlight. I think one of them is obviously that we recognise that the bureaucracy that has been in place previously and the need to reduce that bureaucracy, and also the need really, as I say, to put customers at the centre of that service. Now, part of that is about making sure that we have the relevant information that we can give to applicants, and that's a piece of work that's in progress at the moment. We have reviewed the application forms. We have reviewed some of the paperwork that people have to sign. Some of it is very outdated, and we are reviewing that, and we're only basically using the information or the paperwork that we really need to. But I think one of the significant changes is that we've introduced a system whereby the contractor and DFG officers meet with the applicant at the beginning of the works. So it means that everyone gets together, everyone understands the position, the paperwork is signed at that time, and there's no miscommunication or confusion, because everyone is there and hearing the same information. And we feel that's a step forward for the applicant and the customer, that they hear basically from the horse's mouth exactly what's going to happen and when it will happen, and they meet the faces who are going to be working in their homes. So, we see that as a significant step forward. The other paragraphs that I think are highly significant are 4.7 and 4.8, which confirms that whilst we've put interim arrangements in place at the moment via eTender Wales, we are developing a longer term contractors framework. And the purpose behind that framework is to meet some of the requirements, you know, about having accredited contractors, about being able to monitor performance, about being able to improve delivery times. With that framework, it will mean that the builders have signed up. We know who they are, they know who we are. We'll be able to work with them on a rotational basis. So we build up a relationship, and, you know, essentially we can match contractors to jobs, which can only improve you know, the work going forward and the delivery times, and as I say, the help us with monitor performance as well. The other thing that relates to performance is in 4.11, and, you know, at the start of the meeting we talked about data and performance. The key performance measures for TFGs report on the average time to deliver. And I'm not saying that that's an unimportant indicator, but it doesn't tell the whole story. All it needs is for a couple of complex cases to really skew some of the figures. So what we intend doing is to put in place some operational performance measures. So we'll be able to measure on a stage-by-stage basis exactly what's happening. It will allow us to look and see whether there are any anomalies, anything that we need to change, but it will give us a better story about the journey that those applications and the applicants are taking. So it's our intention to do that. One of the things that I think we've been able to develop in, you know, what is a relatively short period of time is the partnership working with the Princess of Wales Hospital and with V2C. The performance indicator for children's cases hasn't been very good. You know, we've accepted that, and we've looked at what we've needed to do to improve that. Now, you know, it's a bit of a conundrum because children's cases tend to be the more complex cases and can often take longer than the more standard or medium-sized works. But our housing OT has built up, you know, some strong relationships. It's helping with the assessments. He attends regular meetings, so that relationship has really worked really well, is working really well, and is having a difference really in how we are able to take forward cases. As Jill mentioned earlier, COVID happened, and there are two sort of issues within the report that I think none of us could have predicted during the original planning for this. The first one is about the return of complex cases from agents. We've got a number, we've had a request to bring back a number of schemes, and they're being brought back because of the complexity. They have some specialist requirements. I think it's a case that the agent is having difficulty in attracting contractors to deliver those cases, and so they are wanting to return those cases, which of course we're going to accept because we need to move these cases on. But it will have an impact on our workload and our planning, and it's likely to have an impact on our PIs as well, because these are complex cases. The other one in relation to COVID-19 is our ability to attract contractors and the cost of materials. I think it's an across Wales issue, and I've certainly heard it from colleagues in other local authorities that there's so much private building work taking place that a lot of the contractors are working on private houses rather than being available to take on DFG work. So it's something. The other issue is in relation to the cost of materials. There are lots of challenges going on at the moment in relation to sort of accepted cost guidelines. What was in place obviously isn't always relevant at the moment. So we're working with our corporate landlord and the quantity surveyor there to update our costs. and but we are having challenges, and you know, that's something that we're going to have to bear in mind when we take forward the framework discussions, because we have to make sure that our costs are not skewed in any way in relation to other areas, because if it's too low, we won't get any contractors. If it's too high, it means that everyone will want to work here, but we disadvantage our colleagues in other local authorities. So we're trying to find a way of working to have some consistent approach. And that's a very brief summary of the report. There are more details in the appendices, and you know, happy to pick up any questions that you have, but I'd like to ask committee to sort of note the progress and actions that have been undertaken.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive run through, Lynn, and the update. Thank you. So I'm going to open up for questions now, and I can see Councillor Tom Beadle, if you would like to go first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a question. It's not mentioned in report, but referring to one council, I wondered why that we bring in back in-house DFG, and it doesn't include Highways Department. I'll give you a classic example of that, because an amputee that I know can't negotiate getting out of the street because there's no drop curbs, and an application for drop curbs resulted in the fact that Highways said when funding would become available, but she was offered to drop the curbs outside her house at a cost, but of which you wouldn't get access because of parking issues. But I just wondered with oh, I lost my screen. Can you still hear me?
Yep,
Yeah, no,
hear you, Tom.
You're still there. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was just a working partnership with Highways, because I don't think this is an isolated case, because this amputee is in what they call a non-propelled wheelchair. It means that they've only got 4 small wheels, so that she is limited as regards to accessing the community because she cannot negotiate these curbs. And I just why there's no partnership, and I can't reason why there's no partnership working with our Highways Department, so that the DFG can actually, or part of it, be spent to improve the community life for these disabled people.
I think that Martin has put his hands up. I think, Martin, are you able to come back on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Martin Morgans, Head of Partnerships. Councillor Beadle, I don't know that specific case, but I'll if I can take it offline in terms of understanding who that citizen is, I'll pick that up. But in terms of partnership, there's a far better model now in terms of us owning it from an end-to-end process, that we can work with social services, highways, etc. So I don't see this an issue going forward in terms of those requirements. As part of DFG's ramps are there, but you know, ultimately it's to facilitate people access in and out of their homes, and if we need to engage with highways and make that happen, that shouldn't be an issue. Albeit, again, this one council approach is far better than having an external agent trying to negotiate on that citizen's behalf. So if I can ask, I can have the details of that citizen. I'll take that offline and then come back to you outside of the meeting, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I'd appreciate that. I'd say that was a recent referral of myself, and it was Jason Jenkins' reply that said that it couldn't be done only as and when funds became available, and they don't realise the impact that it has on the resident.
I think, again, this alluding really to what Lynn's point earlier is about this citizen approach, citizen centre, and what are their needs, and it's looking at this holistically, not in isolation on departments. So I think if they need an OT referral, we'll go forward from that perspective, and we'll look at that citizen from that hourglass perspective, if that's okay. So I'll drop you a note. If you can give me the details, we'll take it forward. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Tom, do you have any other questions on the report, or was that the only one? Your hand is still up.
Apologies, Chair. It was a legacy hand.
That's okay. Okay. And Councillor Cheryl Green, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. It's really a response to a very important point that Lynn made with regard to the lack of contractors available due to the large amount of house building that is going on. I was wondering, has Lynn been afforded the opportunity of putting forward this as we are now in the process of the LDP formulation for the next 10 years, as I think the point you made really should be taken into account when our planners put forward what they consider to be suitable amounts of housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Lynn, are you able to respond on that, please?
Yes, it's.
Go on, Lynn. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a really important point because the RSLs are finding certainly the attraction of contractors and the cost of materials an issue as well, and have been negotiating with Welsh Government on some of the scheme's costs. How that formally fits into the LDP, I'm not really sure, but what I'll do is I'll make inquiries with our planning department to see whether how best to get that in.
Thank you. And I think Martin has also wanted to comment on that as well. Thank you, Lynn.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Green has made a valid point in terms of the struggle in terms of the contractors, and that's where we see the framework as being our ability to form that relationship with local builders. Once they've signed up into the framework, they'll have a run rate in terms of potential DFGs throughout the year. We can use, because Lynn suggested that we go on a rotationary basis. So it's about us building our relationship to harness those local builders to give us that commitment as well. So, but it's a valid point, and it's a struggle as we've seen with larger schemes with particular contractors going bust, etc. We need to have a real flexible contracting workforce that will support us from a DFG perspective. It's a real conscious effort that we build this framework and the relationship with those builders.
Thank you, Martin. Cheryl, did you want to come back on that?
Well, just to say thank you very much for the replies, and would it be possible for this committee to perhaps put a recommendation that Martin and Lynn should have an opportunity of putting their point to the planners before they finally make the decision on the LDP, because I think all things must be taken into consideration, not just the need for developers to get richer. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll need to take advice as to whether we are able to put that recommendation forward because it sounds like a very valid recommendation on my part. But Pam, do you mind just switching your camera off? Because I was going to go to Richard, Councillor Richard Granville next.
Yeah, sorry.
He was the next one to put his hand up. Councillor Richard Granville.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. First is there an ongoing cost to the authority over the next 2 years as implementing this scheme? Secondly, if we're going to employ surveyors, surely there should be no snagging work, future works once they're employed, because they will sort out the problems internally and with the external person, whoever's doing it, to sort all the problems out. So there should be no rigmarole around that. And thirdly, Councillor Beadle, Canary Community Council worked with BCBC, and we have paid half, and BCBC have paid half to install all drop curbs in Canary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Martin, I think you wanted to come back on those points.
In terms of the cost, Councillor Granville, in the financial sort of assessment, we looked at the monies going out to external agents. And by internalising and ceasing that agent promotion model, we'll be utilising those monies to actually hire our own resource, which Lynn is actively doing at the moment. We've had some successes, so that's a real positive for us because we're adding experience and knowledge into an internal team, so we can grow that area. But I think you are right. For us, it's much better. The whole point is having this close contact end to end with the surveyors, or we like to refer to them as a DFG officer, because they'll take that ownership in terms of communication, but with the citizen, but also ensuring the quality control within the contractor's work is up to scale. Albeit we will have some snags, but we'll be able to turn those around if they do occur. But ultimately, our goal is to go in there, deliver a DFG successfully with minimums, with snagging where possible. But the nature of building with unforeseens, etc. We don't know what we could find until we put that sort of spade in the ground. But it's a real positive step for Bridgend to build that experience. And Lynn alluded to earlier about engaging with our corporate landlord as well. So utilising the skills across the authority in terms of one sort of council approach. I can't answer the drop curb question, but I am going to take it away following Councillor Beadle's reference with Jason Jenkins, and I'll understand that position better for that specific citizen, and maybe understand what authority-wise doing, and probably Zach will be better to answer that response, Councillor Granville.
Thank you, Martin, for that. And then are you happy with that, Richard? Any other questions on that?
No, yeah. Chair, thank you very much, and thank the officers for a good report.
Thank you. And then Councillor Pam Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Same subject. I've had many a conversation with Valleys to Coast and the other housing associations which we have. And even now, they could build in the houses or flats wheelchair, not access, I wasn't getting at that, where the plugs are not on the skirting boards, they are wheelchair accessibility, you know, the height of a wheelchair. So those sort of things could be built in. But the answers I get back is, well, we get the people in there first and then we adapt everything around them. Well, that's all well and good, but the problem is they have to wait, they have to be in all the upheaval. So altering a bathroom, for example, from a bath to a shower or a sit-in bath, it all takes time, and it takes ages to get the grants through and to get those people. In the meantime, they're struggling then, falling in the bath. They can put a seat, but they can't actually get their leg into the bath. So there's a lot more that could be actually done, I think, with the housing associations as well as private landlords and obviously private building. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Sorry, I've just lost my screen. Martin, you wanted to come back on that?
I'll come in briefly, and I'll bring Lynn in. This is just, although it's DFG related, it's specifically about new builds in terms of RSLs and social housing, etc., and linked to our social housing grant, and so the new builds via the RSLs. We are working with Welsh Government and putting pressure on the RSLs to make homes more accessible, to minimise the sort of scenarios that Councillor Davis suggested, which really more accessible houses means less impact when needs adjust for where that citizen needs sort of adaptations. But Lynn, I don't know whether you want to have a quick word in terms of what you're doing into the strategic group.
Yeah. Yes, as Martin said, this is something that we've recognised and something that we're pushing the RSLs to deliver. So during the discussions on the development programme, we are pushing them to provide more wheelchair accessible properties as part and parcel of their new builds. So that's being taken forward. But in terms of adaptations to RSL properties, all of them except for V2C have access to PAG, and I've forgotten this, property adaptation grant. So they can actually claim money from Welsh Government in order to do adaptations to their properties. So I suppose which we don't have any control over, it's over above us. So I would suggest if there are any residents of those properties that require adaptations, for them to specifically ask the RSLs about PAG and whether these can be delivered quickly. The difference to that is in relation to V2C. They don't have access to PAG. I think it was one of the anomalies that happened when the stock transfer took place. So they actually have to come through our DFG process. But one of the things that we've changed in this sort of partnership working was that previously we'd have an application, we'd process it, then we'd send it to V2C to get their permission because it's work on their properties, and then that would take some time. This time round, as soon as we get an application, we go straight to V2C to make sure that we have got permission before we start processing the application, to try to streamline and shorten the length of time that it takes. So that's what we've put in place. But the reality is that sometimes going through the process and finding people to undertake those adaptations can take time, depending on the size of the works.
Okay, thank you for that. And Councillor Altaf Hussain, please.
Thank you, Chair. Now it is about the same. We have been always talking about the properties, about the inner side of the inside of the property. We have never spoken about the external environment, and I have seen many residents struggling with these chairs when they are putting these chairs in their cars because of potholes surrounding their buildings, unadopted roads again surrounding their property. That needs to be looked after. I have spoken it about many times and nothing happens. I think that is very important. It's okay, we're tackling these properties, but we are not tackling those. When these people come outside their properties, they want to go into their cars, and it's a huge effort on their part of their carers. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin, did you want to come back to Councillor Hussain on that, please?
Yes, please. Thank you, Councillor Hussain, for the observation. Unfortunately, from my perspective, it's something I can't resolve because it doesn't fall within my remit. I would love to be able to say I can solve the pothole-related issue, but that's my counterpart, Zach Shell, in terms of that. And I don't know whether it's worthy we could take a recommendation. He could give some feedback, because I know they've got an extensive programme in terms of pothole rectification, but also I think Bridgend is undertaking a trial in terms of unadopted roads. So I think potentially some feedback around that. So but I can't physically make a change. I'm more the house and the conditions and access into in terms of ramps. So apologies on that.
Thank you very much.
I'm conscious that Councillor Amanda Williams has had to leave the meeting briefly, but she did raise a concern about MI, management information, and how that was being developed. And I can see in the report that it is ongoing. One question that I have before I bring you in, Martin, if that's okay, is that I'm concerned that it could be a pretty blunt instrument, just saying how long it takes from start to finish to deliver a project, because we should have an idea. I think we should have an idea at the start of any projects how long it should take them to be delivered from start to finish. Some could be a matter of weeks, some could be a matter of months. And then it's really as to whether we meet the expected timescales or not. So I think there is the length of time for delivery, but there's also have we been quicker or a lot slower at actually achieving what should be achieved, and also taking into account at any given time the external environment with lack of contractors, lack of materials, and so. Is that going to be built into the MI, or how is the MI being developed? Because if we have a blunt instrument, then we're not actually getting a realistic picture of how we are performing.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. And I was going to pick up, but I noticed that Councillor Williams left the meeting because it was on her time. But in fairness to Councillor Williams, we had our corporate performance assessment this morning, where the figures around DFGs were discussed. Unfortunately, the mission, we will make sure going forward they'll be there. But I think we didn't put in there because it is a blunt instrument in terms of that. And the effect on us, as Lynn alluded to, that we've only taken on the process from April the 1st this year. So we've got all these legacy jobs where that time is ticking from that perspective. So our intention is to build this a local sort of PI that gives us more qualitative and engagement and that sort of citizen sort of satisfaction piece, and that's something the Welsh audit was keen there. How well you've done. Is it not just on a timely manner in terms of those areas? So we're going to be building it. I didn't want to put anything currently in the local PI because it's very new, but we are seeing some improvements. I can give you a position statement of where we are at the moment in terms of the PI that I took to the corporate assessment this morning. And unfortunately, when you say a blunt instrument, that Welsh Government, that's how they monitor our performance and comparison as well, using that time to deliver without. So we intend to add that quality of information to give the governance boards and the committees that understanding of how well we achieve from the citizens' perspective. So from a DFG perspective, which is PAM 15, is the average number of calendar days taken. We're currently operating around about 307 days for a DFG. Our target for this year, pre-pandemic, was 240. So the end of this financial year, we're looking to aim at 240 days. But obviously, we never foresee all the issues in terms of COVID, in terms of, and then the stress on the contractors. So this time last year, we were around about circa 330 days. So we have seen an improvement. It's marginal, but it's going in the right direction. Where we've done a focus, because obviously Lynn alluded to how bad we were in terms of the children's. This time last year, we were around about, let me just pull the figures up, 668 days, which between us all is just highly unacceptable. But we're currently operating around about 482 days for children's DFGs. And they're both PAM-related sort of blunt instruments, as you described, in terms of measuring performance. So for us, the children are always going to be the more complex, but we're not there in terms of delivering the timeline. It's not acceptable. So we will build in some local PIs that gives us qualitative information and understanding from the citizen, and we'll also include those PAMs as well. So we can have a sort of overall picture in terms of our performance. But it's a shame, really, because when I look back, the work that we put into data, then COVID came along and give this, because I'd love to be saying to you at the financial year 250 days, and then the next target is 210 for the year after. I think we'll be in a real strong position. But I think it resonates across the council as well, the trouble with recruitment, not just in housing, but social services and other areas. There seems to be a real sort of plethora of issues in terms of recruiting staff, because as it was mentioned this morning, Wales is a small sort of pot, and everyone's going after the same sort of skills and resources. So that's a challenge for us as well. So we just got to be cognizant of that and work within the parameters we can.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. Are there any other questions for Martin and Lynn? So I think that from for us to be able to move and note the report, I think that there's a couple of things that have come out from our discussions. One, that there was a recommendation from Councillor Green that this committee recommends that that the officers liaise with planning so that they can inform the LDB process as one of the actions to come out of this. I also suggest that potentially we have another report probably after the year end, so that we can give chance to see how the DFGs have embedded. So that would probably be after June next year, or if that is agreeable. And then if I could have a mover and a seconder to note the report, please.
Move.
Second.
Right, and is everybody happy with those proposals on the actions?
Yeah.
Chair, can I just say, not a point of order, but if Councillor Green wants to move something, it should be seconded. Oh,
thank you. So can I have a seconder for Councillor Green? Did I get your recommendation correctly?
You did, yes. Thank you.
Right. So is there a seconder for that?
Yeah.
Did.
Great. Okay then. So, and thank you, Councillor Granville, for correcting me on that. So is everybody happy that we now move on to agenda item number 9, which is the the statement of accounts. And I think, Nigel, you're going to be matters arising from the statement of accounts. Nigel, I think you're going to take us through this, please. Oh, sorry, can I just also go back to the other one? Martin and Lynn, thank you very much for your very full update and reports and answering all of the questions. Really appreciate everything. Wish you the best of luck for getting the DFGs up and running, and hopefully it will be a little bit more streamlined. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but fully understand if you want to leave. Okay. Thank you very much. So back to agenda item number 9, and Nigel, hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Nigel Smith, Interim Group Manager, Chief Accountant. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with the Audit Wales Matters Arising letter in relation to the audit of the Council's Statement of Accounts 2020-21. As members will recall, the accounts were presented and approved by this committee on 22nd of July 2021. They were then signed by the Auditor General for Wales and published in accordance with the statutory deadline of the 31st of July 2021. Given the ongoing challenges that we've had over the last year or so and the tight timescales to meet that statutory deadline, we didn't include the Audit Wales letter at that time, as we had to, obviously they had to prepare it and we would have to give management responses. Their letter, known as the ISA 260, is supported at Appendix A, and you can see the detail of both their letter and the matters arising from their audit. It is pleasing to note that it is a small number of matters arising. That said, however, we do place a high level of importance on those matters, and we will ensure that we work to resolve those during the current financial year. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Nigel. Any questions from anybody? No. Well, I would like to thank Nigel and the whole finance team for all the hard work. I think it's really great that we were one of the very few councils who closed their accounts on time, and so a big big congratulations to the team, and also for the small number of matters arising. So, if there aren't any other questions, can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to note the report?
I can move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Janice. That's lovely. So thank you for that, Nigel. And we'll move then on to agenda item number 10, the Treasury Management half-term report, please. So Nigel, I think you're going to take us through that.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. Again, Nigel Smith, Interim Group Manager, Chief Accountant. The purpose of the report is to update the Governance and Audit Committee on the mid-year review and half-year position for Treasury Management activities and the Treasury Management indicators for 21-22, and also highlight that compliance with Council's policies and practices, which has been reported to Cabinet and Council. As a background, members will be aware that the Treasury Management Strategy was approved by Council in February, and we operate within within regulation in terms of our activities for Treasury Management. Our advisors are constantly supporting us through that process. In terms of the current situation where we're at, we have indeed complied, or the Council has complied with its legislative and regulatory requirements during the first half of the year. A summary of the activities is included in Appendix A. Just to draw sort of attention to some of the key points. During the start of the year, during April, the Council received a double instalment of Welsh Government core funding, which is an extra 12.6 million during April. And also we had quite a number of grants that we brought forward from 2021, which meant that as at 30th September, our balance of investments was just under £80 million, and that was with an average interest rate of 0.06%. Now, we'll be aware that that is a significant reduction from the same time last year when the interest rate was 0.24%, but with the government having maintained, or the Bank of England having maintained interest rates at a particularly low rate, and indeed have done so again in the last week or so at 0.1%, we are still sort of doing, faring well comparatively with the range of investments that are available. In terms of sort of jumping perhaps to table A in the appendix, that's on page 115 of your pack. That sets out where we are at in terms of our borrowing and investments as at 30th September. Our loans remain stable as we would expect. We haven't taken out any new borrowing, and that sets out the split of our investments across the main counterparties that we use. Members will note that we've had to make use of the debt management office quite significantly in the first 6 months, and we hold a balance of 15 million with them at the moment. That's essentially the central government bank, if you like. The reason for this is, as many local authorities have got extra cash, it does get a little bit more difficult to actually find local authorities to invest in, which is one of our favoured areas because the return is usually preferable. But we also make as much use as we can of money market funds, which are effectively instant access and relatively secure. Of course, all our investments are done with security as our first priority, that we can get our money back. The other thing to draw attention to perhaps is table 2, the liability benchmark, which is on page 116 of the pack. This estimates how much borrowing we might need to finance our capital programme. And we always sort of make a prediction in advance of the year as part of our treasury management strategy based on our anticipated capital expenditure and available reserves that we have at that time. As mentioned earlier, as a result of the increase in reserves through extra money from Welsh Government, through the hardship fund that was mentioned earlier, and other grants we received at the end of the year, our usable reserves are probably higher than we would have anticipated. Along with that, probably slippage in the capital programme will mean that our liability benchmark, or the amount of money theoretically we would need to borrow to finance the capital programme, is 100.31 million. Our borrowing is currently just under 98 million, so we are pretty much in line with our existing borrowing levels, so I do not anticipate that we'll be looking at any long-term borrowing in the rest of this financial year. Rather than go through in detail the remaining PIs that are in the appendix, members would have had the opportunity to go through. I'm happy to open up for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. So can I open up, has anybody any questions? Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question, really, Nigel, please. Item 4.3, where you explain the unexpected increase in the usable reserves. I just wondered, I hope I'm reading this right. You've explained about, there seems to have been a difference of about 70 million as compared with expectations. And then you go on to explain that. But you explain about 30 million of it, as far as I can see. But I was only just curious about the remainder, really. You know, the other sort of, I don't know, 40 million. I wonder if you could comment on that, please.
Deb, does Deb want to come in? I can't see whether Deb.
Hi, yes, thanks, Jill. For the recording, Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance. Sorry, Mrs. Williams, when you say an increase of 70 million, what figures are you comparing?
Yeah. Well, I hope I'm reading this right, as I've said. You seem to be saying that the usable reserves at March 21 were 114 million. And that was that was an increase, or what had been expected was 43 million. So I make that about a difference of about 70 million. And then there's an explanation about some of the reasons for the increase. You know, obviously, you know, the COVID hardship fund monies, blah, blah. So I just wondered, though, you know, what's the rest of it? Because that explains about 30 million.
I think what it's saying is that we would have been able to use 43 million. I'm not sure that that's necessarily that we would have had 43 million in reserves. I haven't got the details in front of me. I think Nigel got the comparison of usable reserves from one financial year to the other, but they were definitely from the previous year. They were definitely higher than than 43 million. So I think it's possibly the way it's written that's causing some confusion. The increase in reserves was actually the difference between the 114 million from 114 million to the 83 million that we had at the start of the previous financial year. So the increase in reserves was only around 30 million, so not 70 million.
Okay, well maybe then that needs to be reworded, because what's actually written is it was on the assumption that the council would have 43 million held in usable reserves.
Okay, I don't know if Nigel can add anything to that. Nigel, do you know where the 43 millions come from?
Yeah, thank you for that. The 43 million would have been what was in the Treasury Management Strategy, which is written in advance of the financial year end, as it's got to be approved by Council in February. We would have had additional grants subsequent to that we wouldn't have been aware of. So that would have resulted in an increase in earmarked reserves that was unexpected. I think a very important point, though, that you have made, perhaps in terms of the wording, maybe not the best in terms of us, the reserve stood at 114 million, which was an increase from the 83 million, as opposed to an increase of the 83 million. I think it's a valid point that we could reword that slightly better moving forward. Don't know if that answers the question sufficiently.
Okay, I'll digest what you've told me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams, and thank you, Nigel and Debs, on that. I can't see. Have you any? I can't see any other questions. The only other question I have is on page 117, number 3. I just think one of the dates is wrong, because we're talking about 30 up to 30th of September 2020 rather than 21. So if that could just be updated, please. Okay. If there are no other questions for Nigel, could I please have a proposer and seconder for the report to be noted?
Move. Move.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I second it. Sorry.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Nigel, for all of the work on that. So, Mrs. Williams, are you able to turn your camera off just while I hand over to Jill? Is that okay for agenda item number? Thank you. For agenda item number 11, which is the corporate risk assessment update. So, Jill, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. And this is the update on the Corporate Risk Register and the Corporate Risk Assessment 21-22. So members of the Audit Committee will be familiar with this. Good governance requires the Council to develop effective risk management processes, including an assessment of corporate risks, and you'll be well used to receiving the risk register at this Audit Committee. The risk assessment is considered and reviewed by CNB, the senior management team, yourselves as Governance and Audit Committee as part of the Council's quarterly corporate performance assessment framework, and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's Forward Work Programme. It's also aligned, as you know, with the NTFS. So the updated corporate risk register is attached at Appendix 1. It has been reviewed in consultation with CNB and CCNB, and we believe identifies the main risks facing the Council. You will see at 4.2 a summary of the changes. The corporate risk assessment has been or will be amended as per the table below. You will see that there are 3 risks that we are suggesting can be de-escalated to Directorate risk registers. Risk 3, I thought there were 3. Risk 14, and I've lost the other one temporarily. Oh yeah, risk 5. Risk 3, risk 5 and risk 14. So that needs the approval of the Audit Committee. That doesn't mean it necessarily couldn't come back onto the risk register. It's just that it's deemed low enough now, and the mitigating actions deem it less of a risk. So we will remove those subject to the discussion today. And we've also merged a couple of risks, risk 14 and 15, and updated the narrative on all the others. So I'm happy to pause here, Chair, and just take questions on the updated risk register.
Thank you very much, Jill. And I'll hand over to Mrs. Williams, who's got her hand up for the first question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions actually, so I'm not quite sure how you want me to play it. Do you want to take each, if the questions are in relation to different risks, can I suggest that you do each risk in turn, if that's okay, Mrs. Williams? Okay, they are.
Okay.
First of all, I would question the rationale behind transferring risk number 3 to a directorate level. As I understand this is about compliance with legislation, and I don't quite agree with that. That is a directorate level risk. I see that as a corporate risk. And just take, for example, the new Act, the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, for example. I mean, that would come within the, as far as I would understand, come within the remit of this risk. So I'd be concerned if that's transferred. So that's the first point.
Okay. So
Chair, come in on each of them individually.
Yes, I was just going to come back and say I think it would be as well to come in individually, please. Yeah.
Okay. So what we've the reason we've deemed this to be a directorate risk is that each of the pieces of legislation that have come in, we've made an assessment that we've complied, and therefore likelihood of us not complying with the legal requirements is fairly low, and therefore it shouldn't be a major risk to the council. There's no evidence that we don't put in proper arrangements to deliver any compliance with the law, and therefore just highlighting it serves no useful purpose because there's no evidence that we haven't got all the actions in place. In terms of a corporate risk, I don't disagree that the local government and elections is a corporate issue, but it is then given to different directorates to deliver. So the Governance and Audit Committee part will be part of the Chief Executives. The performance assessment will be partly Chief Executives and then devolve down to directorates to deliver the self-assessment. So it's not that we're saying that they're not corporate. I think that anything that is overarching would be in the Chief Executive's directorate mainly, and that would be on the risk register for the Chief Executive. So I think what we're saying is that we've got absolutely no evidence that this is a risk that we're not managing, so it shouldn't really be on our risk register, because we're kind of saying, well, what more can we do to mitigate it? So that, I don't know if that answers the question.
Sorry, that's fine. That's fine. Yes, I understand. I understand the point.
Mrs. Williams, before you come in with the next question, can I just ask a question on that then for Jill in relation to risk 3? Has the risk score actually been changed then, but just not updated at the moment if it's going on to the directorate?
It's a very good question, Chair. Deb, I don't know if you want to it might be useful just at this point to say the additional piece of work that we're doing on risk, if you wouldn't mind.
No, that's fine, Jill. Again, Deborah Exton, Deputy Head of Finance. So in terms of risk, we had an internal audit of our risk management processes back in the summer, earlier in the summer. And one of the recommendations was that, and from work that we've seen other authorities undertaking, is to try and harmonise our directorate risk registers with our corporate risk register. So to do that, we've obviously had a look at the risk registers that are in the business plans for the directorates, but also what information they have. And what we felt was that they weren't really living documents in the same sense as the corporate risk register has become more so. And they were also operating with different templates and different scoring mechanisms. So there was no kind of smooth process to escalate a risk onto the corporate risk register and then de-escalate it. So a lot of work has been undertaken from our insurance and risk officer and line managers, and with Nigel's involvement, in terms of developing some risk management guidance that we'll be able to share with directorates over the next couple of weeks now. One, to help them to adapt to the new templates that we're proposing to use, but also to bring it to the fore, the issue of risk and how they can identify risk and what types of risks there are. And part of the guidance, there is a matrix, so a priority matrix, which is referred to, and you'd see it in the risk management strategy that we have. So to identify generally, but it's not set in stone and it's not rigid, that if a risk is of a higher risk after we put mitigating actions in place, so it's still a red risk, then it would be escalated to the corporate risk register and then de-escalated if it falls below that. But there is obviously grey areas in the middle where you still might deem it to be a corporate risk and want it on the risk register, even though you've got mitigating actions in place. So we'll be rolling that guidance out with the directorates over the next few weeks now, and to enable that to be embedded into the business planning process for next year.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Now, Mrs. Williams, I'll come back to you now, and apologies for jumping in, but I just wanted to get that clarity as well. So if you've got your next questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. Risks 1 and 2. I mean, there's a connection between these two risks in that they are talking about dealing with changes and making decisions about service change. That's the first one. And then the second one is about transformation. It's really just a comment, this, I think, to take on board, because if you look at the way the scores on these two risks have moved, risk 1 has moved very little as a result of mitigating action. Risk 2 has halved. And I would just question, the evidence for those two movements. And I suppose what I would suggest is that maybe it should be considered that there is actually more mitigation for risk 1 and perhaps a little less for risk 2, but they do seem to have gone, completely in different directions. And yet there is a connection between those two risks as regards uncertainty. And again, COVID, of course, is mentioned. But there is connection here, and I think it doesn't quite make sense to me that they have had such changes made to their raw risk scores. Such a divergence, I mean.
Jill, are you able to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good question, one that we could probably debate all afternoon, really. The first one we've alluded to, I think, when we talked about the financial sustainability report, which is it's the underlying pressures and the difficult decisions and tough decisions that council need to make. And that's quite difficult to enforce when we appear to be being given lots of grants and cash. There's a mismatch, Mrs. Williams, between the perception of the amount of money we've got and the underlying financial pressures and indeed projected deficit position for some services. So I think we still aren't comfortable that we have a process whereby we can make those tough decisions. And it's difficult to find savings. We've scratched pretty much the bottom of the barrel, I think, in terms of finding areas where we can make efficiency savings. And we're a very lean council, so it's very difficult also to reduce staff numbers at this particular time when everybody is needed to still deliver the services in a different way. So I think what I'm saying is I'm not comfortable that we are in a position where we are making those tough decisions. I think there are two things that will be highlighted. The first is that we've got to move to a different service delivery model. That will involve some very tough decisions. And we've also got to find our way back to the new normal in terms of what does that mean for service delivery? Does it mean that we take money from service delivery and put it into preventative measures, which is something that may need to happen, and those are very difficult choices. And so that's why I'm not comfortable really that we've got the mitigating actions in place for those. And then the last issue in terms of the delivery of transformation is that we've talked about this a little bit at the audit committee previously, which involves a change of culture, but in some ways some of that has been forced on us. We've had to change the way we've worked. We've got a huge digital programme now in place, and we feel that we're making tremendous progress in terms of transforming services and being able to deliver them in a different way. So I'm not sure if I've quite answered the question, but that is why, in my view, they are quite rightly probably not necessarily in opposing directions, but one, I'm much more comfortable that we've got something in place that can deliver, and the other I'm not as reassured about. Does that sort of get anywhere near an answer?
Yes, certainly, and thank you so much for that detail. I would then, in the light of what you've said, I would be a little sceptical about the halving of the risk number 2. So I think perhaps that just needs to be carefully considered in the future to ensure that you're still content with such a marked level of mitigation. Thank you, Chair. May I proceed?
Yes, please do, Mrs. Williams.
Okay. The next is simply a comment. In order to record, I suppose, what's actually happening in terms of risk management. And one of the things that I see that's happening is that there are internal audit reviews here in 3 areas, in 3 of these risks, and yet they're not referred to. And all I would ask is that consideration be given to explicitly referring to those internal audit reviews as part of the action that has been taken, in order that the fuller picture is given as to what is being considered by the CMB and any other assessors when you're considering the evaluation of these risks. I mean, the safeguarding risk, there are 2 others, GDPR and the cyber security risk. Those 3 areas have been subjected to internal audit reviews, but yet those reviews aren't even mentioned here. So I do think that there should be brief, explicit reference to those reviews, please. It's just a suggestion for you to consider. And then I have, I'll just keep it to one final question. As regards risk 12, It's to do with the protection of the public responsibilities that the authority has taken on as a result of the pandemic. Can I just ask, is there not additional finance available, funding available for the undertaking of these responsibilities by the council? And if there is, then could that be noted, please, under this risk? Thank you.
Jill, are you able to come back on any of those?
Yes, sorry, I was just scrolling through to risk 12. Yes, thank you for the suggestion on the internal audit. I think that's a good suggestion. And yes, there is additional financing for some of the issues raised in risk 12. So we will take that away and update that. It gives a fuller picture. I agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Williams, and thank you, Jill, for that. And Councillor Amanda Williams, you have some questions on the CRA.
Yes, thanks. Now, apologies, because obviously I had to nip out to do the school run. So you might have covered this in agenda item number 8. But when I went through that with my questions, I had something which I thought, is this on the risk register and why isn't it on the risk register? So you might have already explained and would answer why it's not on there. But when we were discussing about contractors, and we're struggling to get contractors to do certain work for us, for the most vulnerable residents in the borough. I wondered what's happening then, because as part of that we were saying we cannot get contractors. They can earn more in the private sector, going and they're busy working on individuals' houses. So we're struggling to get contractors in to carry out works for those residents who require additional, whether it be bathrooms or whatever it is. So I could see on the risk register we've got fails to safeguard under risk 6, unable to attract a workforce risk 8, and then risk 9, important council services are compromised. But I don't think it actually slots into any of those, but I would say it's a corporate risk, because if we are not able to provide these services and go out and do these adjustments to these properties, then there's a significant risk that these residents will require some element of care and they won't be able to manage on their own. So obviously we'll be putting other services in as well, which are already under strain. So I wondered, you might have covered it off in there, that we are okay now with the contractors and we haven't got long delays in getting work carried out. But if we have, then I think that should be on somewhere in that risk, because it's not just Kiers, which I think was covered in risk 9, and failing to safeguard when it comes to workforce. And then we're looking at workforce, it's also the contractors who provide vital services for us, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, completely. Chair, do you want me to answer
yes,
that? Because I think
I
think Councillor Williams again raises a really important issue. It's an emerging risk, one that up until now we've been managing, and therefore it hasn't got onto the corporate risk register. But I think it's one that we're keeping a very close eye on. So we've obviously had, as you know, a supplier who went through, and we've had to retender. We've also got, I think, increased costs coming through from most tenders that are put out into delivering them, and we have been able to secure builders up until now, but we're very aware that we haven't got the market that we had previously. So there's less interest because there's more work, and therefore they're not as interested in perhaps the DFGs, which are inherently small and sometimes complex. So they're not as attractive as perhaps some of the easier, perhaps different jobs. So I think, Councillor Williams, I will take it away. When we next review the risk register, I think it's time to decide whether this is a much bigger problem than we had previously. So I think it's an emerging risk, but it isn't quite at the point where we can't get builders. We have been able to secure builders, but we're very aware that we haven't, you know, whereas we might have had 20 before, we've now got, you know, 5 coming forward. I'm just using that as an example. So I think it's a very good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Councillor Williams, you happy with that?
Yes, thanks very much.
Great, thank you. Councillor Mike Ken, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just letting you know I have to leave now. I got this appointment at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
So bye.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Take care. Mrs. Williams, your hand is up. Did you want to come back on something else? No. Okay. So thank you everybody for all the questions and input into the corporate risk assessment. In view of taking into account all of the comments, could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to say that we have considered this and we will accept a further report in January?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Jill and all of the officers who've been involved in the corporate risk assessment. It's a mammoth task keeping on top of all of the directorate and the corporate risks. So thank you very much for that. We'll now move on to agenda item number 12, which is the internal audit progress against plan, and I'll hand over to Joan for this one. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joan Davis, the Audit Manager. I'd like to talk you through the progress that has been made against the internal audit plan. The purpose of this report is to provide members with a position statement on progress being made against the audit work included and approved within the audit plan, which you as a committee approved in July. Progress made against the approved plan is for the period 1st of April to the 31st of October 2021, and that's attached at Appendix A. You're familiar with the format, which details the status of each planned review, the audit opinion, and the number of any high, medium or low priority recommendations made to improve the control environment. In addition, I've also considered the comments made at the last meeting in regard to the format and possibly the linking of audits with similar themes, such as IT or finance. To try and make this clearer, rather than changing the order, I have included an additional column to show the directorate concerned, which I hope assists in clarification for you. You can see that as at the 31st of October 2021, 8 items of work have been completed and have resulted in an audit opinion being provided. A further 3 audits have been completed and draft reports have been issued and are awaiting feedback from service departments. A total of 10 audits are currently ongoing, with another 8 audits having been allocated to auditors, which should be commencing shortly. Therefore, based on the assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of the areas examined through the testing, an audit opinion of substantial assurance have been given to 2 completed audits and an opinion of reasonable assurance to the 6 completed reviews. Appendix A also identifies that a total of 16 medium priority and 20 low priority recommendations have been made to improve the control environment. The implementation of these will be monitored to ensure that progress is being made. To date, there are no specific areas causing concern, and recommendations that have been made are service specific. There are no general themes coming out. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joan. Does anybody have any questions for Joan, please? No. One of the things that I just want to ask Joan is, do you have any concerns with capacity within the team at the moment and with the progress of the plan for the rest of the financial year?
Yeah, thank you. As committee are aware, the service is going under a restructure, which hasn't been completed as yet. So the resource that we have is the resource that we started the financial year with. With that in mind, when the plan was set, it was set with that in mind to make sure that we would have enough resource to cover it, with the addition of taking some resource from swap if required. To date, there are no concerns. We feel that we will have enough coverage for an audit opinion. We have, as I said, got the option that we can put some work out to swap, who have won the recent tender to undertake that work. So as far as I'm aware at the moment, we're okay. We will know more probably towards the end, around Christmas, the end of the third quarter, because obviously we have in mind resource issues internally, but also within the service departments that we are going into. They are under increasing pressure, and we have had requests to delay some of our work, which we have agreed to, and they've been pushed into Q4. But there's only so many times we can do that without it having an impact. So as I said, by Christmas we will be aware. Mark is on the call, so I don't know if he'll be able to add anything in regard to the structure and the issues.
Thank you, Joan. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Joan. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mark Thomas, head of the Regional Internal Audit Service. Yeah, just to add to what Joan said, in terms of the restructure, we just at the final stages of that at the moment. We just concluding the final HR processes. Staff have been matched to appropriate roles. We got 3 appeals because people feel that they haven't been matched appropriately. So they will be hopefully concluded the week after next. And then once that's done, we'll be able to advertise for the vacant post. So so the end is in sight in terms of reaching the end of this very long process that we are going through. But yeah, just to support what Joan said, we pretty satisfied with the progress that we are making. There are a number of audits that will be reaching conclusion shortly, and we've got the ability to be able to call in some additional support if needed as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there are no further questions, could I have a proposer and a seconder that we've noted the report, please?
Move.
Yes, second.
Thank you very much, and thank you both to Joan and Mark for that update. We now move on to agenda item 13, which is the forward work programme. And I'll ask Deb to take us through this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance. This is a standing agenda item which we receive at every meeting. The purpose of it is to seek approval for the updated forward work programme for the remainder of this year. It enables the committee to ensure that due consideration is given to all of its functions, including those set out in the bullet points in paragraph 3.1. The forward work programme in the appendix sets out those items to be considered in the remaining meetings for this year, and the agenda items for the next meeting, which is to be held on the 27th of January, are set out in the table in paragraph 4.2. Just one point to note, that in row 1 in the table where it says including audits, annual audit summary, that should actually be in row 2, so that's the typing error, sorry about that. So members are asked to endorse the schedule, consider who they want to invite to the meeting to discuss the agenda items, and determine whether or not there are any other further items that they wish to consider. We've also mentioned, and we mentioned this quite a few times in the last few meetings, that there may be additional items coming forward as a result of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, and we add these to the agenda as they come up and as we go forward, and probably more so in the next year after the elections. There will be more coming through in terms of the performance side and the responsibilities in respect to that. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of the meeting, so I don't know if there was anything off the minutes or the tracker that you wanted to include on a future meeting for this year, whether or not there was anything in respect of complaints that you wanted to come back. So I think there might have been mention of a report coming back on complaints. Is that right, Chair?
That's right. So we agreed that we would have complaints coming back in March.
Okay.
So complaints coming back in March, please.
That's fine. And obviously on the DFGs, then that's to be brought back in. Is that after the elections? Then is that
after the election? So I'm not sure whether June would be, because I think June would be the meeting of the first audit committee. Whether it would be appropriate for June. But we definitely need to have
we can take that forward. What will happen, obviously, in the March meeting, we'll bring a forward work programme for the following year, and we can add that onto that. So just take into the recommendations then, which is for members to approve the updated forward work programme, obviously subject to us adding in those additional items that we've mentioned for future meetings.
Yeah. Could I ask, and thank you for that, Deb, could I ask that forgive me, I've forgotten the name of the project manager who is leading the digital transformation work stream. I know that
it's Debbie Morgan reporting to Phil O'Brien.
Lovely. So would it be possible for at least one of them to be at the meeting, ideally both of them, because they may both have different levels of input and knowledge as to both the strategic and the operational sides of the digital transformation, but at least one of them at the meeting, please. Would that be possible?
Yes, they'll both be happy to attend.
Great, thank you. And then on the corporate risk assessment, whether Fran would be able to be there, because she may have been involved in some of the discussions.
Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And has anybody else got any other comments? Open for questions of anybody else? Has anybody else got anything to add, please? No. Okay then. So thank you very much for that, Deb. If I could then ask for a mover and a seconder that we have considered the forward work programme and approved it.
Move.
Second.
Thank you very much. I have no more. I don't have any other items on the agenda. But before we close the meeting, I just want to make everybody aware that this is Jill Lewis's final meeting on the Governance and Audit Committee. And so Jill, as you will all know, joined us in January 2018 on an interim basis. And who would have guessed that this must be one of the longest interim posts in history? So you've been here for near enough 3 years, Jill. You're leaving just before the 3rd anniversary. And pardon?
4 years. 4 years this November.
Of course.
4 years, yeah.
4 years, okay. Mental arithmetic has never been my strong point. How embarrassing! But so 4 years, and you've brought with you, Jill, a wealth of experience from both many roles within a range of local authorities, but also external audit. You've brought with you, your wealth of experience, humour, and I really appreciate all of your support and guidance and expertise that you have, the support you've given to me, but also to the committee and the whole of the council and the whole of the team. You're going to be missed, and I hope that you realise just how much your contribution has been valued by everybody. Now, normally if in normal times we'd have been able to, see you in person, but whilst this may be a little bit corny, but if everybody can just switch their cameras on briefly, just to smile, wave, thumbs up, clap, cheer, whatever you want to do, just to say thank you so much to Jill. You have been, you've been great, and thank you.
We will miss you.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
And Do you want to have a leaving speech, Jill? Have you got one prepared for us?
No, I haven't, but I think it's probably fair to say it has been the longest interim position. It's not something that I intended to do. I was doing other things, as you all know. I'm an independent member in health, and I was doing some other pieces of work. And Darren promised me that it would only be 3 months, and just to help him out. And so I haven't quite forgiven Darren. He stopped emailing me now, but I will email him the day I finish. Yeah. But yes, I have enjoyed it, despite it going on perhaps a little bit longer than I'd ever anticipated. So my chair of HEIW is delighted that I might be able to devote more than evenings and weekends now to other things. So.
I hope it's not. So thank you. I hope it's not going to be all work for you, though, Jill. I hope you are going to be able to play golf and tennis and travel, and not just go straight into full-time working on the health board. So
no, I won't be full-time, but I do have other things that I will be doing.
Lovely. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Best wishes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very best wishes, Jill. And on that basis, on that note, farewell to Jill and goodbye to everybody else until next time. So meeting closed at 4:14.